We have spoken as a team before about people developing resilience. We're not given resilience, we develop resilience from life, and perhaps we are developing the tools of resilience that our elders have. Perhaps our kids are developing resilience. Justin, you've been spending so much of your academic work and pastoral work around the question of what it means to be fully alive, and the question of joy. I wonder if you might say something about joy and resilience, and how you make of that now.
Totally. I'll say it's one thing to study joy, and it's another thing to feel it. I'm by no means a joy expert in the most in that latter most important sense. But I will say that joy takes work. Human beings are not actually hardwired for joy. It takes some rewirements, as it were. That's a term that I've stolen from a Yale professor named Laurie Santos, who teaches a class called Psychology and the Good Life, which has gotten some incredible press recently. And she's been teaching it during the pandemic, actually, on Coursera, and has had a really interesting, very profound response to it. And her course has not only requirements, but rewirements. These are things which, from her perspective as a psychologist, we need to do, habits we need to form, different ways of thinking that are more amenable to well-being and flourishing, more amenable to joy. I think that I sometimes think about joy in my own life as like having to take my probiotic. If I take my probiotic for a while, at a certain point, it feels like, okay, I'm good. No more problems. I'm fine. I can stop taking the probiotic. And then guess what? As soon as I stop, down the tubes. The same is true, actually, of joy. If I don't build into my day things that bring me life, then lo and behold, I don't end up having a good day. I think about this not just from a psychological perspective. That's interesting to me as a theologian because it kind of corroborates what we've always known for like 2,000 years of Christian history. But the real biblical touchstone is just in the New Testament. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, I think it's the 4th chapter, invites the people of God to set their mind on things which are good and noble and lovely and so on. Go check it out. It's like chapter 4, verse 8, I think. Whatever is good, whatever is lovely, whatever is noble, think on these things. Paul is saying it takes practice, actually, to think on good and noble and worthy things. And so if you occupy your mind and your soul with those things for a period of time each day, it really can have an effect. I mean, that for me, most recently, it has involved 3 things. One is like making time to play video games. That sounds ridiculous, but again, some of my 8th graders are glad that I said that. So it involves video games. It involves playing my piano, even though I banged it out of tune. And it involves reading and listening to books on tape. Things which, before the pandemic happened, were the things which already made my life joyful. Try to remember those things and make sure that I'm not losing them in the midst of the day-to-day grind, the stress of living in a pandemic. I think also that Christians are, in some way, I know that I just said that human beings are not wired for joy, but Christians are built for it in a way, and built for joy in difficult circumstances. The pandemic is a particular kind of suffering, one which is registered in each of us in a different way. And to be sure, the least of these, as our Lord himself calls them, are suffering the most these days. But we're all suffering something. And Christians have known for generations that the way of the cross, the way of suffering, is in the end the way of life. And that is, I think, that hope that we have, that resurrection always has the last word, is the secret to not giving in to despair. At least that's been true for me. I'll tell you, there was a moment also earlier this morning. It was in the vicinity of having banged on my piano, and it took G above middle C out of key, where I was standing in my kitchen, and I decided I was going to have a word with God. I knew I needed to say some very holy prayers for some very needy people, some people who really needed my prayers. And I have to say, I kind of gave up, and I told God how I actually felt, which was, God, I would really like it if people would stop dying. I would really like it if people stopped getting sick. Now, I can't sit here and tell you how I believe God was going to answer that prayer. But I will tell you that it brought me some peace to just tell my Lord how I actually felt instead of trying to be somebody else. I don't know that it was joy that I felt, but it was at least peace.